Namaskar, Assalamu alaikum, peace, grace, and hope. I am Ravi Dev, and I greet you from Guyana on this, the 163rd anniversary of the arrival of Indians to South Africa, which happened on the 16th of November, 1860, on the ship Truro. Quite coincidentally, but propitiously, my earliest ancestor, whose name was Durga, arrived from Bengal also in 1860 in the then British Guyana on the 2nd of February, to be exact, on the ship Kirkham. So we have much in common because of that. What it shows you that in India, we could just as well have been shipped to Guyana, South Africa, Fiji, Suriname, uh, or wherever the British saw fit to send us. And it is just by fortuity we are today South Africans or Guyanese or Trinidadians and so on. But the point of it all is that we are one, as I will say. So there is a saying that men make their own history, but not in circumstances of their making. So, what were these circumstances in which we, the indentured, had to make our history? It's important for us to know this. The plunder of the Indian economy by the British gave the English language the Hindi word loot, because that's what they did to India, looted India, as millions of landless peasants were transformed into laborers desperately seeking survival within India, and for those of us who left without India. The British made our labor fungible because of the demand for cheap labor in their colonies of their far-flung empire. Having self-righteously abolished slavery, and I say that with scare quotes, they revived an old indentureship agreement. And it's important for us to know about this indentureship agreement. What it was, it was a contract. And you might want to know the word indentureship, where it came from. This contract was made in two parts, one on top or the bottom of a single piece of paper. And then it was torn. And when you serve your indentureship for a certain amount of years, you then had to bring your half of the paper, which would be indented as it was torn roughly, which would match the other half, because these people were all illiterate. And then you would get your so-called freedom. So we indentured are the result of an agreement that we made in India. Never mind that we were, first of all, forced into it because of the destruction of our economy. And it is important for us to know that between 1834, when this arrangement started in Mauritius, and when in 1917 it finally ended, over 1.6 million of us had been shipped to over 18 countries across the globe. And we have there remained since. A small percentage returned to India. That was part of the indenture contract. And some of us returned, but most of us, 2/3 in most cases, we stayed in the lands where we were sent. So this another aspect of this agreement, so-called, is that it had penal sanctions. Now, this was a civil contract, a contract for you to work, but it's a unique feature that there were penal sanctions. You could be jailed, you could be punished, just as if you had committed a crime. So we were free, but yet not free. We were said to be bound. Now, this agreement was pronounced as by several of our Bhojpuri people in Fiji, agreement to Girmit. somehow it got transmuted in Bhojpuri to Girmit. And in a spectacular act of naming ourselves, this is called having agency. To refuse to be named by those who were shipping us around, who named us coolies. We named ourselves, our Fijian brothers and sisters named us as Girmit. That the agreement was called Girmit, and we were then called Girmitiyas. And I think we need to acknowledge this act of naming, which is important. When you begin to name yourself, as I said, you have now claimed agency, that you are a subject and not an object that someone can simply kick around. So today, there are 18 countries across the world where Girmityas live. And you know that, and if you were to meet any one of them like I am, so easily you would know that we are actually one. And why are we one? We are one because identity is formed out of your lived experience, the experience that you undergo. And our lived experience, bound by that contract, was so similar that it doesn't matter where you go, but if you were to meet another Girmitya and you were to have some kind of interaction, you will see your commonality. In my case, I had gone to New York City for education, and in 1989, a group of us from NRIs from India and Girmityas from various backgrounds formed an organization called GOPIO, Global Organization of People of Indian Origin. But within that conference, we had a breakout group where we called ourselves the Girmitya Island Communities. And we met separately and described our lived experience, and we recognized that oneness out of us. I happen to live across from New York City in a place called New Jersey, and several of us met in my home in New Jersey, and a South African boy, at that time we were all boys, by the name of Anil Suklal. We all met. There was one named Ganesh Chan from South Africa. We all met and sat in my living room, and we ate dal bhat, and we reminisced about our lives as to the influences that had shaped us. And it was so good. It was like a bunch of brothers who were talking to each other. So this is something that we must all recognize, that this lived experience that we shared have made us a common. And there are millions of us across the world who we can relate to. We are not one. We were part of that contract. And yes, the contract was one-sided. We know that. It was geared to give cheap labor for these British colonials to enrich themselves. But we, in our own way, recognized that contract, accepted its terms, and we worked very hard. As we said, we kamar banne wale, we bound, we tied our dhoti, we banded it to fulfill our side. But when the British violated their terms, even though many people would say we are docile, we always stood up, we struck, we went slow, and we protested. And in South Africa, I understand we speak from a location not far from Blackburn, where our people were shot for standing up for their rights. In Guyana, there were about a dozen of these incidents where we were shot and killed. And the British ironically called it, to persuade us, they would use the leaden argument. You see the pun? To shoot us with lead bullets, that was the leaden argument. And that is another point of our commonality. Now, the thing is that as immigrants who escape landlessness, loss, joblessness, famines, caste, and debt, we were determined to work our way up and out of the abysmal conditions which even the groups in the societies into which we were dumped rejected. So that is our other commonality, that the British dumped us into these other societies where there were groups there. In most of the other colonies, there were slaves who were supposedly freed, and we were dumped there. In South Africa, there were other groups of Africans who were there. In Fiji, there were the Melanesians there. And we were then forced into those societies where we were othered, even by those whom we met and classified as somehow inferior. As the British dubbed us, we were coolies. And this is something that we should note, that, all of us in these colonies, we were all branded as one, coolies. So in reacting against that oppression, we all reacted as one. And to a greater or lesser extent, we rejected some of the old divisions of India, of caste and region and villagers and rural. And we, to a large extent, became the first Indians. Because in the 19th century, and even today, if you were to talk to Indians from Bharat Mata, they still focus on their regional origins, whereas we are Indians. We are the children of Bharat. We are Bharatiyas. Before, from the very beginning and up to today, we can claim to be the first Bharatiyas. And the other point I want you to note, and that in this struggle that came out of our own efforts, that we achieved by our own efforts, not only economically, but even our own freedom, was because we stood up and we were shot and we were killed, no one else. And in India, we hear of the nationalists picking up our cause, but we also have to be very, very honest about this, that if you go back to the history, if you go back to the historiography, our cause were only picked up because the other Indians, they really resented being lumped as coolies also. So those of them who picked up our cause, their main reason for doing so was not to be classified as coolies. Many of them wanted to be honorary whites. And that's the truth. Many of those nationalists who declaimed Shakespeare and went to the colleges that the British had opened up in India, in Madras and in Delhi and in Mumbai, they wanted to be whites, honorary whites, as Lord Macaulay had said they would term transformers. We were the ones who were really facing the hardships, and we know that that would never be so. And so we, the Girmitiyas, are the ones who really have carried the brunt of the struggle to free us from the colonial structures, which only today, at long last, in the 2020s, finally, India is now saying they are really Bharat, and they are now struggling for a national identity. We, the Girmitiyas, always had that identity. We knew based on how we were treated and how we struggled that we were so. So I want us to, that we should be proud that to a great extent we jettisoned those deadweights of caste and so on. So to that extent, our crossing made us into Jahajis, fellow shipmates. And when we were even in the depot in Calcutta and in Madras, the bonds were starting to throw off right there, where we all had to eat from the same pot. We had to overcome these caste prejudices. And that continued on the ships, where we had to eat with each other, sleep with each other, live with each other, and form those new bonds. And when we landed in South Africa or Guyana, also in the gangs into which we were employed, it didn't matter what caste you were or what region you were from. It was based on your own abilities. You were then given to be the head man, or you were became what kind of laborer you were. So I want us to acknowledge that also, that we are the ones who first became Indians, but modern Indians. That while all Indians were conscripted into modernity, modernity implied seeing us in a particular way and treating us in a certain way. But we were the ones, the first set of Indians who started to define the terms of modernity as to how we should be treated. And others, especially Indian nationalists, then quote unquote, took up our cause. But we should note that after the abolition of the indentureship in 1920, they dropped our cause like hot potatoes. Nothing wrong. They went on with their struggle in Bharat Mata. And for example, Pandit Nehru in 1947 actually said that we were on our own. And so, for example, when the Indians, the Girmitiyas of South Africa, had to face all the apartheid pressures in the 1960s, India, let's be honest about it, did not cleave to the concerns of the Girmitiya, but to this larger so-called third world cause. Now, so the thing is, I want to leave you with this message is that we have to embrace our unique Girmitiya identity. Because in the modern world, I want to tell you this, we are ahead of so many other lands in terms of grasping modernity, where we accept this unity that we know is there. That is one of the teachings of Indian civilization, Bharatiya civilization. But we know we accept diversity. So we may be from South India, we may be from North India. We accept that it is our lived experience which has contributed more to our being, to our essence. And so what is our future? Our future, my dear sisters and brothers of South Africa, as we speak on this arrival day in South Africa, is to first recognize that unlike what some may have told you, the British had destroyed the India of history. It had already, a lot of it had been destroyed, but we were sent away from an India that had been decimated. So therefore, in these new lands, we saw opportunities. Just like in today, we should be grasping at new opportunities that present themselves any part of the world, and to be able to grasp those opportunities, because we know what it is to lift up ourselves by our own efforts. We have shown that. And this is what I want to leave you with, that we carry a message of liberation for other people across the world. And I want to thank you for this opportunity, for letting me speak to you as a brother in another part of the world, but from the same mother, or from Bharat, through our Girmitiya experience. I thank you, and may our mother, Mariamman, bless us all.